point in time. It says, okay, we're going to freeze things right now, and we're going to keep a copy. We're going to keep something where just like it is. Backups are almost always automated, and backups allow you to recover and restore things that you might have lost. It's like having a second set of keys. If you think of your house keys, you've got a set of house keys you use every day. And maybe you have a copy of your house key in your house. If you lock yourself out, that doesn't do much good. If you have a second copy of your house key with a friend or a neighbor, or in a lockbox or some other hiding place, that means that if you lost your original house key, you could still get into your house because you could get to the backup, right? You could get to the backup. So think of a backup is very similar in concept to having an extra set of house keys. That's kind of the concept, so that if you don't want to get locked out, okay, it's no fun. It's happened to me once and I didn't like it. Okay, but I had a family member that had an extra key, and they could come over and let me in, and then I borrowed their key until I got a copy made. A backup and a copy are two different ways of describing things, okay? So there's something you can do with a backup that you can't do with a copy, and vice versa. Okay, a copy is an exact duplicate of the original. You know how sometimes when you sign really important documents, they want to have two original signatures on a document? You might have come across that at some point, where they have, it's not an original and a copy, it's actually two originals. And so they're exact copies of each other because they both have original signatures on them. Someone could look at either one, and either one can do the job. A copy of a computer file is a duplicate of the original. It means nothing's different about it, except maybe the name might be all that's different. But the advantage of having a copy of, say, a Word document is that you can open it up and edit it just like you could open up and edit the original. Okay, it's like that, two original signatures. It is the original for all intents and purposes. So you have really two originals as opposed to an original and a duplicate, because they're both identical and they both can be edited and managed in the same application. So is a copy a backup? Yeah, it is. It is. If you have a second copy of a house key, it's a copy, but it's also a backup, right? Because it does exactly what your primary key does. Now, there are some situations where a building might use a master key, and there might be individual keys to individual doors. So a copy of an individual key may not be a backup for the master, for example. But a copy is a backup because it is a second copy of whatever you have originally. Now, just like your house keys, you do not want to keep your copy on your computer that you use all the time. That's like having both your house keys on your keychain. And if you lose your keychain, you lose both keys. You want to have one key with you and one key in another location. So if you want to make a copy of something, and you can, and there are automated tools that do it, that copy should be located on a different physical device other than your computer. A physical device could be a hard drive that you plug in, or it could be a hard drive that is at a computer somewhere in the cloud. Okay, so that's okay. And you can actually make copies of things, put them on a little flash drive and stash them away somewhere else. If they don't change, that's okay. But if it's things that change, that's not a good way to make backups. Backups are almost always automatic. There's software that creates the backup. And so you don't have to remember, gee, now that I've changed that file, I better make a new copy of it. or now that I've added something new, I ought to make a new copy of. So you don't have to think about that with backup. Backup automates those functions so that it might be a copy or it might be something else. It might be what's called a compressed file. Now, a compressed file is exactly what it sounds like. It's a file that takes up less space than the original. The backup software has taken out some information that's not essential, and it actually has reduced this physically the size of the file so that it doesn't take up as much space. It's kind of like things that fold up really well into more compact spaces. You might have a picnic table, and if you leave the picnic table, if one of these folding tables, you leave it set up all the time, it takes up a fair amount of room. But if you fold it, it takes up less room, right? So a compressed file is like a folding table. It's still a table, but you have to open it up in order to use it as a table. It's not a table when it's folded up, but it takes up less space. And that's kind of how a compressed file works, is that something in the computer software reduces the size of the file, but it can be uncompressed and be restored to its original condition just by unfolding a folding table. So sometimes a backup is a copy, and sometimes a backup is a compressed file. Both are backups, just that a compressed file, just like a folding table, has to be unfolded. The file has to be uncompressed, restored to the original. Any questions about that? The reason sometimes backup software compresses files is because it uses up less space on a computer hard drive. And so it also uses up less space when it is sent and received over the internet as well. So if you have a bad internet connection, sometimes it's easier to send and receive a compressed file because it takes up less space and doesn't take as much time to send and receive. So we'll talk about different ways copies and backups are used. Now, local or cloud, okay, a decision that makes something help for us. A local backup requires that you purchase a physical hard drive. You just need to go out to your office supply store or online store and just buy a hard drive that's made for a Windows computer, and it plugs in with a cable, and you keep it plugged in all the time. Some are portable. They don't need to be plugged into a power outlet. Some require being plugged into a power outlet. No difference in terms of what they do. It's just the ones typically that are larger are ones that typically need to be plugged into a power outlet. The advantage of one that doesn't need to be plugged in is that you can take it and go with you, since you don't need, it gets the power from the connector on